what caused me to walk into such a dark area. It culminated in a period of absolute darkness where I wanted to die.
John chapter 11, verse 1, this is what John wrote. He says, "Now a certain man was ill. His name was Lazarus of Bethany." That's the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who, later in this story, anointed the Lord with ointment, and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." This is the sisters sending to Jesus. Listen to verse 3. "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus, listen, verse 5, loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. You've got to hear this undertone in this whole story. Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going to go there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." It's good for him to sleep, right? Get some rest and you'll feel better. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." This is a story where we get to see a different picture of Jesus. Jesus, through the first 10 chapters of the book of John, John's witness of Jesus, we've seen him toe-to-toe with the Pharisees, proven his power, proven his might, proven his deity, proven how strong he is and that he really is God and that he really did come to save the world and he really is the fulfillment of the Messiah that they've been waiting for. And Jesus is in arguments and he's in fights and he's kind of pretty like, he's in it hard. And here we see the story swing in a whole new direction where you and I get, John kind of pulls back the covers of Jesus' life here. And you see Jesus with his friends whom he loves in this story. I want you to hear this because many of us have a kind of a skewed view of God, like Jesus as God is cool and stuff, but I've got my life and real life is hard and death is hard and I have pain and I have misery and I have suffering and God doesn't know anything about that. And God and his love, literally his love, really becomes the undertone of this whole story. Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus. Jesus loved them. John writes that here. You see that in this story. We're going to see it in the coming weeks. Jesus is revealing himself in a totally new way in this story that many of us have never seen Jesus. And we're praying, and I'm praying that God's love would just erupt in your hearts and overwhelm our hearts in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the suffering, in the midst of the impossibility that we are experiencing right now. I'm praying that God's love would be real to you. That in your real life, in your impossibility, in your pain, in your despair, in your cloud, in your depression, in your suffering, that God's love would come to you. I'm praying that Jesus would be real to you in the midst of this life that you're in. Here's the bottom line. I believe that really just undergirds this conversation today. Write this down this way. There is no situation too hard for Jesus. Write that down. This is going to be a truth that I want to really guide our hearts today. There's no situation that is too hard, too big, too painful, too messy, too impossible for Jesus. This story becomes a demonstration of God's willingness to engage in our impossible, crazy, tragic, horrific situations that we are enduring right now, or that friends that you have that are enduring. I would hate for you to escape kind of in your heart or in your mind right now and go start thinking about something else because you're not in a pain-filled spot. There's people all around you, in your family, and in your friends, and in your neighbors, and I don't say these. You have a brother, you have a sister that just lost her job. You have a coworker that hates their family. You have somebody in your neighborhood that just, you watch the divorce happen. Literally, you watch the moving trucks come and go. You watch the pain that they're in. God has given you an opportunity in front of every single one of us, of these people that we know and that we're in relationship with, that God wants to use this message not only in our lives, but in their lives too. And guess what? We are going to become the conduit of God's love to these people. I was praying like crazy for this series because I believe that this is very needed for our lives. I think God's timing is miraculous that we came to John 11 right on the heels of this holiday season and the beginning of this new year. Because I think many of us are very crippled right now by the pain that we are enduring and by the tragedy of what we thought Christmas and the holidays should have been like, or the memories of those that have left us or gone to heaven or wherever else they've gone, that there's this nagging inside of us. And I believe that God in His sovereignty and His grace is bringing this chapter to us right now. And as I was praying, I was just praying, God, bring your love. It was like God just kept kind of like poking me in the chest as I was praying, like, dude, I want to bring my love through you. And I'm praying that you would listen with those same ears today, like let God just kind of poke you in your chest and go, look, this is a story of my love, and there's people that need to know my love. Maybe you're in the room, or maybe you know those people, and I'm praying that God would just wake our hearts up this way. There's no situation that is too hard for Jesus. This is going to be the undergirding thing of this. And I just want you to think about yourself for a second and go, what's your impossible? What is that situation that you think is too hard, too big, too messy, too tragic? Is it the loss of a loved one? Is it maybe a recent divorce or a divorce that you're hoping would finalize? Is it the distance between you and one of your kids? Is it the unreconciliation, the broken relationship between you and a sibling that has just kind of grown more and more tense? Or maybe you and a parent that's just kind of grown more and more distant as you've just kind of gone through these holiday motions and you just kind of existed in the same room together. What is it that's your impossible situation that you've kind of just resolved yourself to just go, well, when this is over, when the pain goes away, when it doesn't hurt so bad, then life will be normal again. Where you've kind of settled into this groove where you're not kind of just numb because of how bad it hurts and how much energy it takes and anxiety that kind of just covers you with all of this. So you just kind of flat and like have no like hope or excitement about the future. What is that situation? There is no situation that is too hard for Jesus. I believe He shows us that in this story. Look at this. Write this down first off. Our impossible situation is all about. It's all for Jesus' glory. Our impossible, our storm, our chaos, our tragedy is all about Jesus' glory. It is for His glory. He will get glory out of it. Is it painful? Yes. Does it seem impossible? Yes. Does it make sense? Probably not. I mean, I look at this story. What Jesus did made no sense at all. The fact that He would wait an extra couple of days so His good friend would die, that He'd intentionally walk back into a place, into a region where the guys are looking to kill Him, none of this makes sense at all. Jesus has a bigger picture in mind. He has God's glory, His glory in mind. Look at what He says in John 11:4. When Jesus heard it, He said, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God, he's talking about himself, may be glorified through it. This doesn't end in death. This doesn't end the way, kind of the way it's looking right now. It doesn't end with this suffering that we're anticipating right now. This is going to end differently because I'm going to get my glory out of this. Jesus is saying, I'm going to get my glory through this situation. Now, this is hard for us because all we can see is our perspective. All we can see is how bad it hurts. All we can feel is how much we miss them. All we can hear is the voices of what went wrong and how the argument ended and how painful that breakup was. All we can hear and feel and see is our perspective. But Jesus, you just got to hear this promise that he's making. I see something that you don't see. I see circumstances, I see people, I see situations, I see something that you don't see. And for us, there's some hope in this. And I'm praying that you would just latch on to this promise for just a moment. Because in the midst of your pain and your despair and kind of the cloud that you're feeling right now, I'm praying that God would give you something to hold on to, like an anchor in this storm that you're feeling. And I'm praying that this would be one of them. That in your heart, you could just sink this anchor into your heart and say, okay, somehow, some way, it does not make sense to me right now, but God is going to get glory through this. And really, I think that the discipline that kind of comes for us is starting to look for God at work in this situation. Now, maybe recently you've been at the hospital with a loved one, or maybe you've had a friend that reconnected with you because you needed help getting the divorce papers figured out. There's maybe situations that have kind of emerged that you never would have anticipated talking to that physician or that nurse. You never would have anticipated this conversation with this coworker. Jesus has kind of been bringing these different opportunities in front of you where somehow he is going to work his good and his glory through this situation that seems so impossible and so dark right now. And really the discipline for us, church, people struggling, us hurting, us with pain, the discipline, even in the midst of that pain, is for us to kind of lift our eyes and go, God, where are you at work? And this seems really tough because you think of most of us in the midst of our pain, really all we can think about is us. And I say this just as your pastor loves you. Sometimes the worst thing for us is to continue to look at us. When I've experienced rejection or betrayal from close friends, and in that betrayal I want to justify and I want to make sure that I did everything I was supposed to do and I did it right and I said everything right and I'm kind of trying to work through this pain and this loss and this grief in my heart of a close friend has walked away. I want so bad for it to make sense and to line up, and I said everything right and I did what Jesus told me to do and I did what the Bible says to do, and it still hurts. And what I'm doing, and I get turned this way, I get turned selfish so quick that I did this and I did that and I made this and I said this and I did that. And in this kind of coping with the pain many times, all we're doing is just looking at ourselves. And this promise from Jesus that I'm going to get glory out of this situation gives us just a glimpse, just a glimmer that there might be something bigger going on here than we can see, that we can know, that we can feel, that we can even understand. And that this promise becomes something that we can grab a hold of, and in the midst of this turmoil and this pain, this suffering that we're experiencing, that God could actually begin to give us a perspective that is not our own. And our prayers can actually start to change in this time. Instead of just praying, God, get me through this, God, get this over with, God, get this pain away, God, heal this brokenness, God, heal this and fix this and make this go away, and we're just kind of holding on for this, everything to be fine again. Our prayers can change to, God, show me where you're at work. God, show me where you're moving in people's lives. Show me what your perspective is. Help me to see what you see. And I'm praying that this is kind of what God would do in our hearts, is he'd kind of help us to zoom out a little bit with him as he's helping us to see what his glory looks like. And I want you to hear this, that most often when God is working in your circumstance, in your pain, in your turmoil, in your loss, he's going to be working in people. And there's relationships that God has put in you. There's conversations that he's given you. There's moments that you would have never had you not been in this circumstance, this situation, this storm, this impossible spot that you are in. And I'm praying that God would give us his perspective and show us, begin to reveal his glory to us in the midst of this storm that we're in. Write this down as well. Walking towards the pain seems so backwards. Walking towards the pain, towards the suffering, towards the darkness, towards the grief, towards the loss, it seems backwards. But that's exactly what Jesus does in this story. Jesus gives us a picture that's something totally different. When most of us kind of with the turmoil that was going on in the family, with the potential of danger himself, to watch Jesus himself walk intentionally towards this pain. In fact, he sets this scenario up. This is what's so confusing to me, is he sets it up. He stays an extra 2 days where he's at. And he even says he's glad about it. Like, for your sake, I'm glad that Lazarus has died, so that you may believe. He has this totally kind of weird, backwards way of thinking here. In our minds, and in our perspective, this pain needs to go away. If you can fix it, Jesus, go fix it. Martha and Mary send to Jesus, Jesus, come fix it. Our brother's dying. You love him. We love him. Let's fix it, Jesus. His disciples are going, Jesus, if you walk back into that situation, you might die. They're trying to kill you. But Jesus gives us a picture that's something totally different. He walks towards this pain, towards this brokenness, towards this darkness, towards this grief, towards this potential, and he even sets the situation up by intentionally staying where he is an extra couple of days. This is backwards for us. For us, we got to get through it as quick as possible. We got to get over with. We got to pretend like it didn't happen. We got to just kind of hold on to the way things used to be. And I believe that this is what kind of keeps many of us in a state of just depression and turmoil for a longer and more extended time than we would ever hope to be in. It's because we're fighting for what could have been, what should have been, the way we thought it would go, the way Christmas should have transpired, the way the family memories should have happened. And we've had this expectation and this kind of anticipation and this dream and this hope that's now gone. And many of us, we won't kind of let go of that old life. There's a friend of mine who's become a mentor of mine. His name is Jerry Sitzer. He wrote this book called The Grace Disguised. Some of you have read it. If you haven't, we actually bought them for super cheap out there in the lobby. I want you to go buy a copy and read it. Some of you know somebody that's struggling with grief massively or loss. This is his subtitle, How the Soul Grows Through Loss. He talks in this book, this helped me tremendously, just as a pastor and learning how to love and minister in the midst of loss and grief. I've been around several families. I've been around a ton of pain and a ton of hurt and helped dear friends bury babies. I've helped wives bury husbands. I've been around in a lot of grief and a lot of loss and experienced different losses of my own, but he does such an amazing job with the tragedy that he endured. Losing 3 family members in 1 second, 1 accident, 1 collision, 1 moment. His wife, his daughter, and his mom, all gone. Watching this man walk through this pain, watching this man's soul grow through this loss is so inspiring. I actually had the opportunity to interview him this week, and we're going to have him on the screen here in a few weeks at the end of this series. I think his story and his words are going to bring a ton of encouragement and inspiration to us. But one of the things that he talks about in this book that helped me, and I think will help us so much, is exactly what Jesus models in this story. Right after the accident, he literally is in kind of a dreamlike, maybe a vision-like, trance-like state. Overwhelmed, I'm sure, by the tragedy of what he just endured. One of his kids in a full body cast after the wreck. He had 3 kids that survived the wreck with him. And just all of that turmoil that happened, he finds himself in this dreamlike spot where he in his mind, he's running as fast as he can towards the west, towards the sun that is setting. And it's the sun that's setting on his old life. It's the sun that's setting on the way things used to be. It's the sun that's setting on the memories and the enjoyment of the life and the family and the way him and his wife being married and his little 4-year-old girl and all of the things that were kind of established in his life and kind of expected in his heart. He's running as hard as he can to keep the sun in sight, to keep the perspective of the way things could be and should be and ought to be and I want them to be, and he's running passionately towards the west, but really all to kind of to an aimless run, because eventually the sun just sets in the west. And he describes it this way in his dream, that he finds himself standing in the twilight. And it's in the twilight that God speaks to him. He says, Jerry, if you want to experience life, joy, hope, peace, the quickest way to experience the light that you're running after is to turn and face the east and head towards the sunrise. But running towards the sunrise meant facing the darkness that was in front of him. It meant diving headlong into the grief, into the turmoil, into the pain, into the questions, into the agony, into all of that he was experiencing and feeling and hurting with, and the sorrow that was just overwhelming him. And many of us, because of our propensity to run from pain and discomfort and suffering and loss and grief, we have just got to focus on the west, running towards that sunset. And I believe that God was speaking, and is speaking through Jesus in this story of what it looks like for us to turn and face this hurt, face this pain, face this darkness, and know that there's a promise in this. I love what Jesus says in verses 9 and 10. Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. To actually face the pain is the beginning of the healing process, is the beginning of the revelation of Jesus as the light in your life, is the beginning of the intimacy that will be developed as you begin to lean on Jesus in the midst of that darkness. To turn towards the pain and the east, towards the sunrise, and walk through the darkest part of the night is the beginning of the healing in your life. To endure the suffering in such a way that you're not just isolated alone, but that you learn to lean to Jesus, the light that can be in you, and illuminate your steps through the darkness. There's a great certainty in Jesus' model and in these words that we're talking about, that there is actually where you will find the intimacy and the peace and the hope, not as in the circumstances working out right, but in the closeness that you achieve in your relationship with Jesus. One of the families that we buried their baby with them. I remember my friend was trying to comfort him. And he said, man, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't even imagine. I think they were twins, and one was born and one died during the birth process. And I remember the dad saying back to my friend, saying, actually, I feel bad for anyone else that hasn't experienced what we've experienced. It was kind of this backwards statement. What do you mean? And what he started to speak to was the intimacy of their connection and their relationship with Jesus in the midst of this darkness. How near Jesus has become to them, and how real his love has been to them, and how intimate they've begun a relationship with him that they had never known before. And he longed for everyone else to experience that same kind of intimacy. He longed for others to experience that same kind of love of God that comes as we identify with him in this brokenness, and this suffering, and this pain, and in this grief. And I remember just thinking, like, so humbled by that comment. So humbled as I read Jerry's book, as I meet with him, as I learn from him. So humbled because of the experiences that so many people have had of walking intimately with Jesus in these dark, dark places. Experiencing intimacy that I have never known. Wanting so much for me and for us as a church to be inspired to walk into those places intentionally. I love the psalm where David writes that the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not walk. Though I walk through this valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. And that picture, that's what I long for us. Walking towards the pain seems so backwards. that really is the way to our healing, to our joy, to our freedom, to the sunrise. Next week, we're going to talk about this, and I just got to tell you, that sunrise is something so much different than you think. Because we think so temporarily, we think just right here and right now. We are actually eternal beings. We are created for eternity. This life is not all there is. That we are being prepared right now for that sunrise someday, for that eternity that is coming. This is not it. Jesus cares so much more about our souls and eternity than he does the here and the now. And all we can see is here and now. And it takes intimate relationship with Jesus to understand what that sunrise even looks like. And I'm praying that God brought you here today because you're suffering and you're hurting and you have no answers to anything going on. And you're hearing this one answer today, that Jesus wants to bring you life and light and give you a picture of what eternity could be like if you would be in relationship with him, and that you would begin that intimate connection with him even now. That you wouldn't wait until the end when it's all said and done, when every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that he is Lord. But that today you would say, Jesus, if you have the ability to walk me through this pain, walk me through this darkness, then God, lead me, take me by the hand, walk me through this suffering, because I have no idea what that next life looks like. And I'm praying that God would get you to a place to make that decision today. So the last thing I want you to hear and I want you to write down is this: Jesus walks into your impossible situation. Jesus walks into your impossible, traumatic, terrible circumstance. Jesus walks right into the middle of it. God could have stayed at a distance. God could have just kind of left it as it was in this story. But we see a different picture of Jesus. We see his heart, we see his love, we see his compassion. Number one thing Jesus felt with people when he encountered them was compassion. And we see him with this heart of love in this story. He said, let's go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews are now seeking to stone you. Are you going to go there again? Thomas, called the twin, this is verse 16, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Jesus is walking into a very impossible and precarious situation intentionally. God is not a God that stands at a distance and keeps you shamed and in the corner and keeps you pretending and isolated. God is a God that meets you in the middle of your pain, that comes in the middle of your suffering. God is a God that joins you where your turmoil is, that walks intentionally into the middle of this suffering and this pain with you. He doesn't leave you. And I pray that you hear this, because this is the good news about Jesus Christ. This is the good news about God himself, that he sent his son into this life, into this world, that he didn't stay at a distance. He didn't stand on high and demand that we get perfect and come to him, seeing our lack of ability to become perfect and be in relationship with him. He came himself. He came into our impossible imperfection with no ability to solve the problem. He walks into the middle of the mess with us. This is the love of God. This is so amazing that Jesus walks into our impossible situations. I pray that you would just hear the love and the heart of God, that he sees you in your need. He sees you in your darkness. He sees you in your pain, in your suffering, in your turmoil, and he's walking towards you today. He's reaching his hand to you today. He's bringing his love to you today. And he wants you to know what life is with him. He wants you to know what hope is. He wants you to know what freedom, joy is. Circumstances may stay almost exactly the same. The loved one is still gone. The relationship is still fractured and hurting. But in that, Jesus begins to reveal himself and to show his power and his love to you. I pray that you would hear that God's love is coming to you today in the middle of your impossible situation. It's easy to get antsy right now, isn't it, when the music team's up here? I'm just kind of reading where we're at for a second. here's what I want to just call us to today as a church. This is just the one simple next step I believe God's calling us to with this passage. Is to learn to walk towards this pain. To learn to walk and lean into the darkness, to lean into the hardness of the situation. And for those of you that are in it, this is what it might look like for you. Is just to begin to talk about it. Just to begin to kind of maybe open up to somebody that you trust that can point you to Jesus. Not point you to some kind of self-help, whatever thing that's going to try to make you feel better or whatever, but that somebody you trust that can point you to Jesus and to begin to open up. It's going to feel like a huge risk. There's going to be fear of rejection or embarrassment. There's going to be fear of judgment, that they might think less of you because of this pain or the suffering that you're in or the brokenness in your relationship or the trap that you're stuck in or the loss of your job or whatever it is that you're feeling is just weighing you down. The step towards the east is just to begin to talk about it, to begin to share openly and honestly about it, and know that as you begin to kind of pull back the curtains of the darkness that's just kind of surrounded your heart, God's going to begin to bring His love and His glory into your life. Those of us that know people that are in this place struggling, you're sitting in the darkness, feeling isolated and alone, here's how we can intentionally walk towards the darkness with Him. Ask Him. I want you to ask Him specifically. Hey, you lost your mom. How was Christmas? Hey, I know that it was just you and the kids this year at the holidays. You okay? We can become a picture of Jesus just walking into the darkness with them, leaning into these broken, lonely spots. Don't just leave it at the awkward silence like, well, they know I know, and they know I care. They don't know. Say something. Don't just leave it at the kind of just, nonchalant, well, if they needed help, they would ask. No, they probably wouldn't. Ask them. Call them. Reach out to them. I guarantee you have a friend, you have a family member, you have somebody in your life that needs you to take this step towards the pain. It's uncomfortable. You're not sure what to say. You probably won't say it right. In fact, those of you that are in this spot and you're fearful of opening up, you're like, well, they're going to say something stupid and trite, and I'm going to want to punch them, and so I shouldn't say anything at all. Still, just give them a shot. They probably will mess it up. I'm praying that we would become a people that just learn to intentionally walk towards this place of healing, knowing that God is preparing us for eternity, knowing that He's preparing us for something far greater than what we could see, feel, touch, and hear right now. He's opening our hearts and preparing our perspective for what is to come in this next life that He has given us and called us to. And the call today is really to get our perspective zoomed out and begin to walk towards that healing, begin to walk towards that intimacy with Jesus. So here's how we're going to close today. So I want to pray. And I want to call all of us just to a spot of response.